Welcome to Talking in Stations. I am Matterall here with the crew from Talking in Stations. We're going to talk about EVE Online, specifically the CSM elections. Now, the elections have come to a close. The results are out tomorrow. So what we thought we would do with some smart people is look back at last year, tally up the formulas on predictive models on who won with looking at CSM15, and we're going to apply that to CSM16 and see who we think are the winners. And we'll do that in just a minute. First, I'd like to say hello to my friend Rich.
Good night and good morning, depending on the time of the world.
We're also here with Shen.
Hello, hello.
All right. And also from Talking in Stations, one of our new Talking in Stations members, this is Ren.
Hello, hello.
And Ren is represented by a Dramil. You can see that frigate there.
I kind of like this ship.
Okay. Let me turn you down a little bit because you're super loud. So you can back off the mic a little. Just make sure. Okay. Let's get started with... we were going to do a little bit of news, but I'll just make an announcement about something that we recorded earlier today, and that was an interview with guys from Pochven, the Strybog, Kybernauts, Interstellar Triglavian Collective. These are three groups represented respectively by Moldavius, Opus Magnum, and Zeramus Plague. So these guys told us what their pain points were in Pochven, and they told us what they plan to do about it. So they're doing a protest, destroying all their structures, sending a message to CCP that Pochven is not working very well. Certainly not working for them in that they are under attack by N+1, which means blobs of fighters that they can't possibly take on, and they are just going to cut to the chase, destroy all their structures, and not worry about their structures anymore. And they don't have to defend those, so they can go on offense. Something along those lines. Check it out. It's a full hour with Triglavian guys. And now, for today, Rich, this is something we've been curious about. Now, a little conflict of interest, or we should say, we'll recuse Rich from speaking too much into this episode because he is a candidate for CSM16. And was endorsed by Fraternity in a significant way. It was a big surprise that happened a few weeks ago. So we'll see what that's like. Ren has done some work along with Rich to take a look at what the last year results looked like and how they were achieved. And we'll take a look to see if that can predict who's going to win tomorrow. So Ren, let's see your presentation.
All right, CSM16. Can we 538 the vote?
Yeah, 538 is a website for, let me turn you up. 538 is a website for elections and statistics and that kind of stuff. It's 538.com. So we're going to do EVE Online version of that.
So, first of all, how is the CSM elected? It's elected using STV voting.
Hold on, I'm not seeing your charts.
Sorry, what was that?
I'm not seeing
we're
your
still
chart
seeing
being
a
broadcast.
Dramil, yeah. When you share, you'll want to switch the share over to your presentation. Does that make sense? He turned it off. He'll turn it back on in a second. In the meantime, I'm going to fix a little sound issue.
How's that?
There we go.
It works perfectly now.
All right. Now it looks a bit more fancy.
All right, let's go.
All right, STV voting. Last year we had 36,000 votes and 10,000 unique votes. How do you make a sense of the mess? We use STV voting. So the advantage of STV voting over, say, the American system of first past the post is if you have a group of people where 45% want one person, say 40 want another, and 15% want a third candidate, the third candidate very, very rarely gets in. And that 15% is always underrepresented because first past the post, the 45% is always going to get to 50% faster than the 15%. Now, normal distribution of voters mean the 40% will get in as well, but that 15% will never get any decent representation in Parliament. So SDV voting was invented to make a sense of that and to give more representation than for the smaller guys. That is probably closer to being fair. So what they do, wait, give me a sec, I just had someone at the door.
Did he say someone was at the door?
Yes.
They always come knocking right when you start doing your presentation. By the way, we'll if we have links, we'll give them up so you guys can see the stuff.
I have to say, this election and the wait for the results, it terrifies me. It's the longest few days I've ever had to wait for quite a while. I hope I don't have to have this kind of wait in other times in my future.
When you become a father, it'll be worse, but don't mean to scare you.
Well, so let's get something out straight. So when can we know the result, Mataro?
The results are coming in tomorrow. CCP will do a presentation. I don't have the hour though. Do you? It's Friday, probably around.
I don't either.
Yeah, probably around 1800. I'll see if I can track that down while we're sitting here waiting. But presentation last year was really interesting, and I encourage you to watch it if you can live. It literally is a horse race because the way they did it last year, and it was CCP Aurora that put it together, was a slideshow. And so for every slide, it was a different round of voting, and she drew arrows so you can see where the residual votes went, which was really amazing because you could then see when somebody either got into office or was knocked out of competition, those extra votes went to the next person. And so she would illustrate how that actually happened. And it was very interesting. And I imagine they'll do something similar. Let's see if I can actually ask someone for the actual times that they're going to do it. But make sure you're watching CCP TV, or maybe we'll actually bring that up. And maybe they have it on their schedule. Let's see.
Matterall, I believe red needs to be moved back in.
Oh, thank you for telling me.
Matterall, I believe red needs to be moved back in.
Oh, thank you for telling me. Oh, hold on a second. That was a recording that came up, so I thought you asked me twice. I was like, I'm getting to it, dude. I'm getting to it. But Rand, you're back in. Just go ahead and share your screen and we'll get started again.
Sorry about that. Delivery I've been waiting for days and days for.
Yeah, I went to look at CCP's schedule, and they're actually restreaming us, and so it came up. So I'm looking at this week, and I do not see it on their schedule, so I'm not sure when tomorrow. But we do know Friday is the results for CCP TV. All right, let me grab your stream again. Here we go. All right, take it away.
I have to look at these numbers with, red tinted glasses.
Rose tinted.
It's rose tinted, red tinted. Well, these ones are nice and red tinted, but they terrify me. Also, Ren has been torturing me with the numbers, telling me what could possibly happen
Don't
and
spoil
what
it.
might not possibly happen.
Okay, so I didn't actually make the spreadsheet. Someone, nice person, provided it to me, and what they have done is they've taken all the votes and split them up into who those votes are. So how do we do the SDV? Well, first of all, we tally all the votes. So Merkel Chen had 5,325 initial votes. Gobbins had 3,700. You go through all the candidates and work out all their first preferences. There's 36,000 votes. We're looking for 10 candidates. So we take those 36,000, we divide it by 11 because we want 10 plus 1, so 11. So you need 3,200 votes and change to make it in. As you can see, Merkel, Chen, and Gobbins are over that 3,200 quota, so we elect Merkel, Chen, and Gobbins. But Merkel, Chen, and Gobbins have more than 3,200 votes, so what happens to their votes? Well, we start running preferences. So, for example, Merkel, Chen's preferences go to an innominate. If you look here and follow through, he has an excess of 2,000 votes. 1,886 of those votes go to a nominate and follow the preferences. A bunch go to Brisk. That's because other people didn't just quite follow the Merkel-Chen nominate candidate. There's a percentage of people who went not Merkel-Chen Brisk. We then retally everyone's votes. As you can notice, Gobbins and Merkel-Chen are now out of it because all their excess votes have been redistributed. Find out who's got the lowest. In this case, it's Liam, and we eliminate Liam's votes.
Liam de Wildebeest. I believe he's a diplomat.
Yeah. Whoops. We then repeat this. But when we originally tally them, all the votes go to the best preference still alive. So if we look here, we had 10 votes from Liam that went to Juventus. And if you follow down, when we tallied in the first round, we had 1375 going to Juventus. Now we've got 1387 going to Juventus because Liam's preferences are now going there. Now, 1375 plus 10 does not equal 1387, but there are 2 or 3 more votes further down which don't quite follow this specific order, and that's where those extras come from. After we've done this again, we just repeat it. We elect our dudes, we follow through and follow through the preferences, then eliminate whoever's lowest. And we keep doing that until we get 10 people elected. Any questions on STV voting and how it works?
No, I think there's a lot of work that's already been done on how it works. They can find that out there. But let me put it this way. It's like a crowd of people trying to get through a door all at the same time because there's a giant monster coming and they need to get through the door to be safe. And so the first few are crowding at the beginning. They get through okay, so they're safe from the monster. The monster's killed like 6 or 7 people in the time that the first 2 get through. And it's a process of, can you get through the door when everybody's trying to get through at the same time before this monster eats you up?
Now, these votes, the votes that get passed down, while of course those who get the first, second, and very early spots in terms of the initial votes do get the most benefit, what about much further down? Some people have said that anywhere past 6 is irrelevant, but we have a total of 10 slots we have to fill. How important are those later slots, the lower level, lower priority slots?
We'll get to that later, but depending on who you're voting for, I think it actually got someone in with a 9th preference last year.
So every vote counts, huh? Every vote slot
counts. So votes disappear every round, and we're wondering, why did votes disappear? Like, we've put a vote in, why is our vote no longer counting? Basically, it comes down to people being lazy. They've only put 1 candidate or 2 candidates down a lot of the time. So, for example, UAX Death here, when he got eliminated, all his votes went to preferencing. You've noticed there's no preferences here for him to go to. So those votes get eliminated. And what this means over time, you actually need fewer and fewer votes to get in because more and more votes get eliminated. By the end of the vote last year, about 20% of votes were eliminated.
That's wild, meaning that they had no preference that they went to. They just fell out of contention.
Yeah, so they either had no live preferences left.
They either had no live preferences, or they just simply only had UX Def as their vote and nobody else.
No live preferences means either all their candidates have been elected, or those candidates are no longer in the vote because they've been eliminated. So there's no one to give it to. Yeah, so the monster has eaten those votes. So exhausted. If you actually look on the transfers, what does exhausted mean? Well, if you look here, Maria has 1,476 votes for Maria, Gobbins, Stadio, Kenneth, Loresto. But she's also got 470 straight for Maria. So when Maria got elected, almost a third of her votes that were in excess don't have a second candidate. So they get exhausted. And they, again, get in by the monster.
Oh, into dust.
Yes, into dust.
Rich is looking at those thinking like, what a waste. I could use those.
Yeah, they're the frat votes. So, Rich, those are the ones you want to have actually put down multiple candidates.
I hope so.
All right, so who's going to be elected? What I did was I went through and worked out this year's candidate for each of the blocks I could find. I then tried to match them up as best I could to candidates last year. AOM, for example, I could not find who their candidate was last year. And then we take the votes that those blocks gave last year and assign them to the candidates this year.
Well, we have someone from AOM here in this room, Shen. So do you know who is at the top of your ballot?
Nope.
I did ask him.
Okay.
Yeah, he asked me. I mean, I last year this time I was too much like a new pro. I did not understand what CSM was. So yeah, and I don't think, because that was right after the winter Cold War. So we have to remember it was very divided. It's not like right now where Horde and Test are voting for each other. It was very much like each coalition voting for themselves. So politics has changed within the game. So things may change up. Who knows?
It's a rather complicated system, Ren. Is there any way to cheat this, or is this robust and bulletproof? Is there any possibility that one could stop the count?
You can't stop the count, but you can definitely cheat it, and I'll go through later how that works and how it has actually happened in real life.
So, who's most likely going to be elected, and who are the ones battling it out, trying to pull out votes from thin air and groups that didn't tell them that,
So
or
Merkel
aren't publicly
Chen,
disclosed?
Merkel Chen's getting in, Gobbins is getting in, Vili is getting in, Kenneth is getting in. Innominate is 99.9% getting in. Brisk is pretty much getting in. Brisk is a bit of a hard one to work out because I have given him Izuki's votes, which he's not running this year. So I did put Izuki's votes because a lot of them did go to Brisk last year, but they might not turn up this year to vote for him. But Brisk also did pull a lot of preferences from a lot of weird places. So he actually got quite a few preferences from people who voted for Gobbins, for example, or Kenneth last year. Once we get
So we're
those
7 candidates down. Who are the remaining 3?
6, I think. Yeah, so once we've got these yellow ones in, we get some excess votes. So, for example, Horde last year had 14% of the vote. You need 9% to get elected. You get 5% excess. Test had an excess of 1%. Brave had 2% of the vote. And once you start working out Kenneth's, all those extra stuff, you get about 5% between NC, PL, and FRT. If you look here, a lot of those guys put ProGod second. So when you start looking at it, you go, there's 13% of the vote here. ProGod only needs 9% to go in. He's likely to get in. So we can put ProGod down. 13% minus 9 gives 4%. That 4% then gets split between Ron and Rich, which unfortunately Ron's probably going to get the higher percentage because only Frat went Ron, and
Don't scare
all
me.
these other ones went only Frat went Rich, and all these other ones went Ron. And as it's done proportionately, most of them are going to go to Ron.
Oh, that's terrifying. I love Ron as a person, but his CSM policies are not my bag of dirt.
Well, Ron has a long way to go to actually get in. So I've given him about 4%, but this is assuming perfect preferences, which, as we've seen, preferences get exhausted. So he won't actually get the full 4% filtering down, and he still needs to get to 9%. There's a lot of votes between 4 and 9%. So he's got a good shot, but I don't actually think he's going to get in.
Let's continue and come back to why that might be.
Okay, so Mike, for example, Mike got in pretty easily last year.
Mike Azariah.
Yeah, and I suggest he's probably going to get in. But there is a little bit of a kink in Mike's path to get in, is he got a lot of Icarius's hand-me-downs when Icarius got eliminated. Icarius isn't in this year, so are those guys going to turn up to vote?
Well, Icarius represents the group in HiSec, right? He's the leader of that.
Silent Co.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they're a huge voting. Well, I don't know if they're a huge voting block, but there are a lot of characters in that group.
They're huge, but whether or not the majority of those characters can vote is still up to speculation. I haven't heard from Silent Co. Or at least I haven't seen any public announcement of who they are backing this year. So I'm not too sure what's going to happen with Icarus's former voting block from the previous year transferring to this year.
Go ahead, Ren.
The other interesting one is Torville, who got in. Now, Torville's a streamer. Can we say that Ron potentially might get some of his votes? Maybe, maybe not. I'd potentially say that Ron's streaming audience is more Goons Pappy, and if they're Goons Pappy, they're probably already accounted for over here and actually won't vote for Ron as a streamer straight up. So Ron, he's got a path, but I'm not sure he's going to make it. We've got
And
the
also, back to some, just a quick point. A lot of times you see a lot of null-sec people, they have their out in a lot of this high-sec alliances that has no war deck. So the question really comes in of how many actual human beings that only plays in high-sec.
One last thing on Icarus. Icarus, again, being the CEO of Silent Company, when he ran last year, he got a certain percentage. That's what we're looking at here. I have heard that Dr. Spod might actually get a lot of those votes. I'm not sure at what position, but a pretty high position. So that is interesting if it works out for him that way. Anyway, go ahead.
He's been apparently given a massive injection of votes from a mysterious third party, but he's also wondering if it will be delivered, if he's actually going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm terrified of the prospect as well. Ren?
So, Hard Knocks was the best wormhole candidate last year with Izuki. Lorenzo had only 3% of the vote to begin with, but he got almost to 9% by the time he got in, with different preferences for filtering down. And he was actually last eliminated. Now, Hard Knocks don't have a candidate this year, so potentially those votes are going to go to Teddy. So Teddy's one we can put down as potential.
Let me just make sure that people understand that Hard Knocks, their candidate is not Izuki, or was not last year. It was Laura Secco.
Yeah, so Hard Knocks is Laura Secco, but Izuki was the other wormhole candidate. Izuki's not running this year, and Laura Secco's not running this year. The highest profile wormhole candidate I could find was Teddy. So potentially those votes will filter to Teddy, so Teddy potentially could get in. But I don't think he's going to quite get there. I think wormholes need to get a little bit less tribal, start concentrating more on what they agree with and what they don't, and less on what they disagree with to be able to get people in.
It's, you mentioned this, and it's going to be my eternal regret that I did not mention my 14 plus months of service in a wormhole, although it is a C2. However, in regards to wormholes, I have apparently been promised or told that another large wormhole group has put me on their voting ballots, especially at number 1. So I'd like to see how this plays out. It's all about ifs and buts, and does it actually deliver at the end of the day? But I have been told that I have been given one large wormhole group's voting block from Warren Wormhole, a Chinese wormhole group.
We'll see how that works out. We'll know tomorrow.
So there's a few other people which are very hard to pin down. Phantomite waded in last year. Phantomite got a lot of preferences from a lot of weird places. But for him to get those preferences, he had to survive long enough that those people who got the original first votes were either elected or knocked out. If you actually look at Phantomite's votes, there's probably 7 or 8 votes which you can clearly see look to be 1 or 2 individuals who put 30 or 40 votes into Phantomite. Is he going to continue to hold that, or with Spod now contesting him, will Spod get those votes?
I'm not sure if the low-sec groups will vote Dr. Spodemain over Phantomite. I'm not sure if some of the other groups that voted Phantomite the previous year, including some of the small-scale PvP groups, would vote Dr. Spodemain either, because, I don't think he'll get that support simply because of his name and his background, but it's all up to speculation.
You also have Suetonia fighting for those votes, and Suetonia is probably the hardest person to pin down how many votes he's going to get, because he didn't run last year. He doesn't really have an obvious supporter block. I mean, Volta does vote for him, but they're not a very big voter block. But you potentially know that from his history and his reputation that he's going to pull a lot of preferences from a lot of places. So if Suetonia can survive the first few rounds and start pulling preferences, he's got a more than decent chance to get in.
And he was CSM16, so he's been in there before.
Yeah.
seeing
Arcia is another one that's hard to pin down because, again, she didn't run last year, but she's got a high profile and she is on the Pappy preferences. However, although she's on the Pappy preferences, as we've seen here, Ron is probably going to pull those before they ever get to Arcia. But if Ron happens to get eliminated before Arcia, or Phantomite gets eliminated, those potentially will follow through to Arcia and she could potentially get in as well. There is a path that she can get in.
I'm seeing apparently the Silent Company list is in order: Mike Azariah, Maldavius, Dr. Spodomane, Jurius Doctor, Rix Javix, Winzent, Phantomite, Uriel, Brisk, and Arcia. So I think Mike Azariah, will be inheriting the voter base from Silent Co from previous years, or the previous year.
Well, hang on.
Yeah,
Don't jump to the end. But if you could, can you tell us at this point of vote counting who is in and who's on the fence?
So Merkelchen, Brisk, Indominate, Gobbins, Philly, and Kenneth are pretty much dead set to go in. Like, there's very little doubt that they're going to get in. Mike and Progod, I'd say, are 90 to 95% to get in. And then the last two votes are very much up for grabs.
Well, something willing. I hope I get in.
Something willing.
Chance.
Terrifying.
Last two places.
I really hope my votes pull through. If it were not me, I hope Dr. Spodomane's votes manage to pull through. But it's
All right.
competitive at this point because some of the last remaining candidates, I deeply respect them. Spod, Phantomite, Arcia, Sutonia.
All right, so let's make sure that we're clear on there's 2 spots left in our predictive model here that Ren has put together. And we have Arcia, Sutonia, Teddy, Spod, iBeast we haven't talked about yet. Tell us about these guys that might contend for the last 2 spots.
So iBeast, I believe, is the biggest streamer of EVE Online. Torval got in as a streamer last year, so potentially iBeast has a spot. But again, he's another one that's very hard to predict because he didn't run last year. And you need to know what his audience is. So if his audience is Pappy Goons, they're potentially going to vote straight down the line for Pappy and Goons. And although he's got a big audience, he's not going to actually see a lot of that audience vote for him. Ron USMC has the same issue. His audience is almost certainly going to be Nullsec, Pappy, Imperium, and they're going to potentially mostly vote down the line of what they've been suggested to.
I believe iBeast has should have the backing of the Russian community, and certainly has a lot of backing in terms of the small-scale PvP community. I neglect to inform those who do PvP, including myself, that unfortunately the small gang PvP community is very divided on who they're going to vote. And I'm not sure if we could organize or cobble together a block to challenge the nullsec dominated.
I think iBeast is
CSM.
compromised in a couple ways. One is he's got like a Phantomite, Sutonia, even Arcia, working the small gang angle. And on the other side of it, he's running against another Russian guy from XIX, isn't he? Like, it's a big name from XIX, which is Fire Coalition. So you may see a lot of people vote for him that might have gone to iBeast. It's going to be interesting.
CCP does count alternate account votes. As long as you're Omega, you can vote. It's not You're not limited by, say, DNA. You're limited about how many accounts you can turn into Omega status.
So there's an interesting point there. A month or so ago, you had the Capsulated Day event. On the Capsulated Day event, there was about 300,000 skill points given away for free. So a lot of people Omega'd their accounts for that, to get the free skill points to then extract later. Those accounts are still Omega just in time for the CSM and could have voted.
Interesting. So there may be a chunk of votes that are a bunch of characters that weren't really meant to play. They're meant to get rewards, but those votes are available to be directed in one way or another.
You had to muck around a little bit to do it, so you had to Omega your account on the last day of the Capsulator event, and then you'd have 4 days of CSM to get there. But I suspect more than a few people did do that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody planned that far ahead. Maybe, but who knows?
I did, but I'm weird.
Well, clearly, look at your spreadsheet.
So do we know like if Fire is voting on their own or are they voting with Legacy or Pappy in general? Because they are part of Pappy technically.
I haven't seen anything from Fire at this stage. And I couldn't match Fire from last year either, from where they are and where they're going.
Let me throw some names out at you, see if they ring a bell. Another wormhole candidate that we've seen is Evi Kuvo. That anybody know about him? Also, I saw somebody's name that kept popping up. I think it might have been Evio. No, it was Mark Resurrectus. He's a wormhole candidate as well. I saw him kind of come up in small gang circles.
So Mark had, I think it was Ashy Online recommend him. So he does have some wormhole backing. The issue with the wormholes is they kind of need to work together to get in.
I'm afraid, to my knowledge, with what happened with Oren and his inability to run, and looking at the top candidates that the Praise Bob Discord listed up, 3 of them aren't even wormhole candidates, and the 2 remaining wormhole candidates are in a position of being deeply divided. The 5 candidates listed were Mark, Stitch, Suetonia, Teddy, and Phantomite. Stitch, Suetonia, and Phantomite aren't even wormholers, so this puts it at an interesting point of contention. To my knowledge, Stitch is more of a battleship brawler. He's a well-known small gang player, but I'm not sure of his voter base. And as for Teddy and Mark, unfortunately, I believe with the case for Teddy, there is a good chunk of wormholers who will refuse to vote for him, which is going to be a point of contention. I'm not sure about Mark Resurrectus. I compared to say Laura Secco, I knew who Laura Secco was and I knew who Teddy was, but he seems to be a lot newer, and I don't know how much of a supporter base he'll get in this election.
Well, it doesn't matter. They all have to work together in order to get a candidate over that. What is it? 5%? 6%?
You need to get to 9% officially to get in, but it's actually closer to 7.
Right, because
they do have the votes. So wormhole candidates.
It's 9% when you first start, but it gets lower and lower as time goes by. Is that what you said?
Kind of. There's something I'm going to show a bit later.
Okay, go ahead.
So the wormhole candidates definitely have enough to get someone in, but Azuki needs to agree with the Hard Knocks guys, and I don't see that happening. So wormholers just need to start realizing that they've got enough in common that they need to work with each other and stop focusing on their differences before they can get anyone in.
Well, they have to vote their interests, and their interests completely collide in some ways. So it's better that the other camp doesn't get their wormhole candidate in than it is you get someone in there to represent part of your interests. I think that's what needs to be understood. Is it's not like, hey, we're wormholers before we're anything else. I think getting someone from Hard Knocks would be a terrible thing for people in the Exuki camp, we'll call it, and the other way around as well.
So the question is then, if you don't have a wormholer in who does the advocating on wormholer's behalf, so would a wormholer rather Villy advocating, or would they rather Azuki advocating for him? Well, potentially, I'd say Azuki is better choice for him.
The joke has been it's been Brisk because he's the one that brought up like, hey, you guys are going to squash the wormholers on this one thing. But he was kind of laughed off the stage by wormholers who were, and it's become a meme ever since. But it's not an issue of nullsec representing wormholers. Nullsec doesn't really care about interfering with wormholes. It's just that they have their advice that they give, and if it actually hurts in some way wormholers because there wasn't a candidate there to protect their interests, I think that's what we've seen in the past actually happen. But what you might have is someone from Pochven, or you might have someone who's a low-sec candidate, like a Phantomite in this last session of CSM, partially represent their interests because he's familiar with some of the tactics that they use, because he's a small gang guy, and wormholers are basically small gang with some mutations. Put it nicely.
I think for the case of Phantomite and the wormhole vote, it becomes this really awkward and interesting conundrum where people are not voting who they support, but they are voting for who they don't support the least. Somebody who they hate. It's not somebody they vote that they love. It's somebody that they vote that they hate the least, or they dislike the least, or has even the slightest amount of similarity to them, and it puts them in this really awkward area where the candidate they're voting for doesn't actually know much about wormholes, or not enough to be qualified as a proper full-blooded wormhole noble.
All right,
So
shall
for
we
them
move
to
on?
be,
Yeah, let's move on.
yeah, I think we should.
All right, so sixth preference. Is there a value in the sixth preference?
What is it? First, describe what the sixth preference is so we all know what it is.
So Villy straight up said that there's no value on the tickets past 6 it's our Discord actually.
Yeah.
So you put your candidate 1 down, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6th is the 6th person you want to go in. Then you go 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. A lot of people have said 6 to 10 are actually useless. I tend to disagree. So from last year, if you look at the pre-elimination tally right at the end, so this is the last one that went in. Torval had 25.58. Lorenzo Secco had 23. So Torval got in by about 250 votes. If you look over here, Torval was 9th on the Imperium voting calendar. And if you follow here, he got 177 directly from the Imperium voting. So 177 of those 250 that got him in came directly from the 9th candidate. Now, this one specifically didn't quite get him in only on the 9th preference, but you can see that there's very much potential that the last 2 spots are going to be decided by spots 7, 8, 9, and 10 on someone's ballot.
Don't scare me. Also, this is heresy. Do not let Laura Secco know about this. The last year's loss and everything and what's happened this year have... I'm sad to see that Laura Secco didn't run this year. I think if he knew about this, oh god, I don't know how he'd feel. That's heresy, huh?
But I think the point here that you're making, Ren, is that way past the 6th spot, your 6th preference, way over into the 9th preference, you still had 177 votes coming from the Imperium, which is a big group. But that's still nearly 200 votes that are available at the very last rounds.
Yes, and Horde, for example, was even worse. So if you follow Horde through, you got Gobbins, who got elected, Maria, who's elected, Stedio, who's eliminated, Kenneth was elected, Blazing Bunny was eliminated, Meredith was elected, Pandora was eliminated, Izuki was eliminated, Storm was eliminated, and Barilla was eliminated. So at this point, all those Horde preferences that didn't quite fill up on the other ones, they just disappeared because they didn't have an 11th candidate.
Do we know how many votes that was? Was that...
Yeah, I could work it out if you want.
Only if you can do it quickly. It's no...
only on the spot. If you can't do it on the spot, are like 7, 8, 9, 10 positions as worthless as Villy says, or do they have more value? Is there a diamond in the rough in there?
So there was 56 that came from Maria that got eliminated, and Kenneth got 347. So there's probably 347 votes that got eliminated from Kenneth. Now, not all of those are going to be from this one ticket because they're going to be eliminated from, say, this ticket here as well. But this one, they went to Lorenzo. So Lorenzo was getting some there, but there was somewhere between 300 to 400 votes potentially that were getting eliminated just because there wasn't a candidate left on that ticket.
But in some way, this only matters to big block, right? Because Imperium has such a big voting power and Horde has such a big voting power that it's possible for their 9th or 10th candidate to get affected by their place on the ballot.
No, this is counterintuitive, but that is completely wrong. So, as your candidates get elected, some of your votes get used up. If you've got one where eliminated, this person, then they'd get the full 1,800 votes. Whereas if it's a Horde one, a bunch of the Horde votes disappear into candidate 1, a bunch of them disappear into candidate 2, a bunch of them disappeared into candidate 4, and only 400 were left over. But if you had someone who's voting for small candidates, all 1,800 of those votes would make it all the way down to candidate 10, and then candidate 10 would get them. So the small block actually wants more candidates on there than the big block.
So if you're gonna want to pass the votes all the way down, you have to draw a real losing hand when
Well,
all of your initial
no,
ones
that's
get
what this
eliminated.
is. Well, that's what this is built for, but nobody's really using it the way they should. You're supposed to vote for your dream candidates, and so if you vote for the guy, say you're into role playing and you really want this guy to win, but you don't think he can win, if you put that guy in first and guys like him for the next 9 slots, your vote won't be wasted when it gets to the 10th sure thing candidate at the end there. So you really should be voting for your dream candidate. Eventually, your vote will hit something that counts. Doing it the other way around, I think, is when votes get wasted.
Yeah, so potentially, if you wanted to do it this way, you'd vote for, say, an Arcia, if you're in Pappy, and then go Gobbins all the way through, so that your vote for Arcia counts. And eventually, if Arcia gets elected, then your vote just goes into Gobbins and follows the Pappy line down. But Arcia will hold those votes for a long time and potentially will get in because of that.
Yeah, and if she gets eliminated early for whatever reason, doesn't the vote still get used by Gobbins?
Yeah, the votes just still pass down to Gobbins, so Gobbins will still get those votes.
Only if he survives, right?
Yeah, only if Gobbins survives, but Gobbins is going to survive.
He's a survivor.
Well, Gobbins will get elected immediately, so...
Yeah, we all hope TIS candidates get in there. We'd be very excited to have any of them, but all of them would be great too. Okay, Ren, what else we got?
All right, so what happened with Kenneth last year? Kenneth is probably the most interesting person to get in last year.
Yeah. By the way, watching this live, we watched Kenneth's numbers go up and up and up, and it was very much a horse race. It was very exciting to watch him. He was actually the one candidate I endorsed last year. And so, watching him actually perform in this horse race, watching it live, was amazing. And that's why I think you should watch it tomorrow when all this gets announced for this year. Go ahead, Ren. Sorry.
So Kenneth and Blazing Bunny actually did the smart thing. So NC and PL made a deal with each other to preference each other. So if you look here, Blazing Bunny, Kenneth, Maria, who got elected, so that doesn't really matter. Gobbins, who got elected, so that doesn't really matter. Blazing Bunny. What it means is they're basically in a 2-horse race by themselves. They ignore every other candidate in the field, and whichever one of those guys who are left at the end gets all the preferences. So if Blazing Bunny goes out first, Kenneth gets the preferences, and vice versa. If Kenneth goes out first, Blazing Bunny gets the preferences. And what happened was Blazing Bunny got eliminated, so Kenneth got a whole heap of votes. The interesting part came a bit later. Those votes were not enough to get Kenneth elected. So, if we look up here, we got Maria Taylor, Gobbins, Stedio, Kenneth. But we've also got missed it here. So Maria had a huge proportion of her votes going just to Maria. So about a third of her votes, give or take a little bit, go just to Maria and have no follow down candidates. Whereas up here, Gobbins has a whole bunch of votes. But you look all the way down here, you get Gobbins, so it's about 1/20, so about 5%, 4 or 5% Gobbins votes had no preferences. So what was happening was Maria wasn't getting elected at the start of the round straight up. So she was getting Gobbins preferences. 1,800 Gobbins preference went to Maria, 1,177. Maria then easily got elected with those preferences and sent preferences to Kenneth as well. So she sent 700. So between Gobbins and Maria, you've got about 900 preferences going to Kenneth. But you've got a huge amount of people getting eliminated and all sorts of things. And the reason for this is 3/4 of Maria's votes were directly coming from Maria, and 1/4 or so was coming from preferences from Gobbins. So when they started pushing those votes down the chain, 3/4 of the preferences followed what Maria wanted, and only 1/4 followed what Gobbins wanted. On the second last round, enough candidates of votes got eliminated that we said exhausted before, that Maria got in on her own steam without Gobbins' preferences. So, instead of a bunch of those preferences being eliminated because Maria has a high elimination factor, we go from here, where Kenneth's getting 220 plus 700, so he's getting 920 preferences, to now he's getting 1,400. So he's picked up basically 500 preferences just because Maria was getting elected straight away, and Gobbins wasn't splitting preferences with Maria further down the field. And that specific moment is when Kenneth got elected. If that didn't happen, there was a potential that Kenneth wasn't actually going to make it.
That's a scary thought.
What's the lesson here to be learned from that?
CSV is quirky as hell.
Well, what should be the best practice for a voter in the future?
Use all your preferences and don't have the exhausted ones. So if Maria didn't have that such a big block of people who got immediately exhausted, this
in other
wouldn't
words,
happen.
she had no backup people after they voted for her.
Yeah, they had no second, third, fourth preference.
That's bad, fraternity. That's on you. But go ahead.
So if she didn't have that, you would have noticed this sort of ping. And what you will notice is this is where goons shine the brightest. Goons have had over 80% of people vote for their main one, by far. Horde has 50%, which is pretty decent, and the rest of them are not anything close. So this is where goons win CSM, and this is how goons win in CSM, is because people follow that list. They're to the death, down to the 10th. They don't waste votes like Maria here, only got 470 there. You won't even find Merkel Chen having just Merkel Chen until you get to like 30 or 40 votes. Like people, even down here, 56, they're following the list. So put your 10 candidates in is the biggest thing. Don't just put one.
Got it. So fill in the ballot.
That's all for now. There are some interesting points that we can go through in terms of where Phantomite got votes from, but I'm not sure you want to go that rabbit hole.
Yeah, where did he get votes from?
He got votes from all over Matterall.
Let's find out.
All right, I'll bring this back up. So if you look here.
Sorry, the clarity is not quite there. The bottom half of the graph looks good though, but.
All right, so Phantomite, this is the full list of the first vote. Phantomite here got 1,467, but if you look on the actual vote list, Phantomite got 180 just for Phantomite, and then he doesn't really get much, and then you got 92 here, which is Phantomite, Loresso, Insidious. And you follow down, you follow down again, you get Phantomite, Kenneth, Mike Azario. Now this is a pretty weird voting combination.
Mm-hmm.
We keep following down to Phantomite, Stitch, Kalen.
That makes more sense.
But again, it's a fairly weird voting combination because there's nothing else there.
That's low sec voters. I mean, small gang.
The one thing you got to understand about this is there's 40 candidates and 10 positions. The chances of getting people to vote match is about the same as winning the lottery. So having 31 people who go Phantomite, Stitch, and nothing else tends to start looking like someone who's a single person voting 31 times.
Right. They're sending a signal that way too. I mean, that's how you send a signal that you voted for someone. It's basically a receipt if somebody pays you for your votes. But in this case, it looks like somebody with 30 accounts was a low-sec fan because those two are very closely related.
So it's very, I guess, extremist where they say, I'm only voting these candidates and nobody else. Nobody else gets a sliver. They don't get a penny from me if they don't succeed. Is that what is going on?
Yeah, pretty much. So these are the first two ones I could find with Phantomite was filled out for the first 10. And if they're filled out for the first 10, they potentially are one person, but they're also potentially Phantomite saying, these are the 10 people I think you should vote for. So this is potentially where Phantomite actually starts getting people from multiple people. So Phantomite, when he got in last year, I tend to suggest that he had a bunch of high-value supporters who had multiple accounts that kept him alive long enough to start pulling preferences from other people because he's in random places on a lot of other people's votes.
That tracks, actually. Makes sense because we... I think there's not a lot of room for ballots in small gang. You know, I don't know if they distribute it. It could be a corporation, though, couldn't it? Like if you have 30 people in a corp.
Yeah, 30%.
Yeah.
But those sort of blocks, it's hard to predict what they're going to do next year because what they're going to do is they're going to move as a block. So 30% people are one person. They're still a block as such. And
Yeah.
potentially they'll go, Saturnia is better. So that's why Phantomite's really hard to predict if he's going to make it or not.
I wonder if there is a way we could discover behaviorally if small gang guys think independently or wormholers think independently while nullsec guys want to be told what to do.
Well, if you want to check that, I would suggest you check out Stitch Canelan, who he's in an interesting position in the small gang community because he is a truly small gang. However, it's a bit divisive because he hasn't played a lot recently, and he's very, very specialized compared to the other candidates, say Phantomite being the big one, having quite a lot more diverse experience in small-scale PvP and also the support of low-sec candidates.
The issue I have with working that out is I don't have the ballots from last year because I wasn't playing last year. So I can't go, this is the hard knocks, they only put 3 people down. Anyone who puts a little bit different, okay, that's not someone following the tribalism. If I had the full ballot from hard knocks from last year, I could potentially go through and work that out.
I am fairly sure that as for the small gang PvP ballots from last year, they pretty much weren't none. People given a few selection of names and people toss them into a hat and juggle them. I do understand that there was a sizable community of people who refused to vote Phantomite due to his past actions while he was under snuffed out snuffbox. And because of that, he lost some support there, but obviously not enough that stopped him from getting elected. He still got elected.
Well, so in conclusion, Ren, we're looking at a situation where more than ever, null blocks are dominating the CSM election we predict with 8 positions pretty much in their pocket.
7 plus Mike is high sec.
Sorry, thank you. 7, well, that's a little more typical, 6 or 7. You're right. Mike is just an incumbent that's getting back in. Hopefully, if his base shows up in high sec.
There's one last point I want to make, is how to abuse this.
Oh, wait, before you get to how to abuse it, let's go to Shen, and then we'll come back.
Just want to say, if you look at nullsec as whole, we are also very divided. Right, we're divided right now into 2, but before it was 3. It's more like Imperium, Legacy, and PenFam. But the thing that's different from null block to small gang to wormhole is that we have a very high base of population. We have a high number to start with. So even though if we're divided into, let's say, 3 or 4 blocks, we still have that number compared to, let's say, wormhole or small gang.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ren, how do we abuse this system?
So this election technique is actually used in Australia for the Australian Senate, and it was abused very hard about 6 or 7 years ago. So the Australian Senate has 6 candidates go in. Instead of 10, we got 6. And what was happening is you get 3 from one party, 2 from another, and the 6th candidate is a bit of a toss-up. Sometimes it goes 4 from one party, 2 from another. Sometimes it goes 3 and 3. Sometimes you get an independent in. What a bunch of small guys worked out very quickly and started working out together was as long as they preference each other before the nullsec ones. So the Australian one's a little bit different. You had infinite preferences. You don't have just 10, they have infinite preferences. So what the small guys worked out was as long as they preferenced each other first and then the 2 big parties are last, one of them is going to get hit. They don't know who it is. It's a potluck. And as long as you're not last at any one point of the count, you'll keep going. So what happened was our mate Ricky Muir got in with just a primary vote of 0.51%, and he needed to get over 10% to get in. He needed to get to about 13 by the end, which he did, because all those preferences bounced around and bounced around and bounced around until he was the last man standing. And this is how high sec, small gang, wormholers can actually start abusing the system, is start working with their preferences and getting a block of 10 candidates together and going, we're going to preference each other. And they will get in because of this.
This is what Pappy did this year. I think this is the first year I've seen an organized nullsec beyond, well, I mean, I've seen fragments of it. And with the exception of Noros, who went a little bit off the regular vote, you saw a lot of collusion between Pandemic Legion and NC Dot, which is not unusual, but you also saw Horde in there. Still not unusual. But the more you look at Pappy with Test and everybody else, you see a real plan there where they have all put their own candidates at the very top. Not unlike the Imperium has done in the past, but they're more or less 1 or 2 or 3 entities as opposed to 5 or 6.
Yeah, and because they've done that, they're pretty much assured Pro-God Legend is going to make it on. Now, if Frat had to put Rich as first, there's a potential, and if Frat had followed the voting as well as they did last year, which they might not have because Maria is Frat and Rich maybe not quite so Frat, that Rich would have got in instead of Pro-God.
So close, Rich.
So, yeah, if Rich had been
No,
first...
this is torture. This is torture.
You poor man.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Rich. But as being second candidate, his potential chances of getting in is going to be a lot less because they're going to start splitting and dividing votes a lot more.
Yeah. We also don't know. These are the planned votes. We don't know if people actually follow what they're told to do, right? I mean, there are people who just say, yeah, I don't think I'm going to vote that way. And they change up the order for their personal preference. So you just never know.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can predict it. I could probably predict which rounds a lot of their candidates are going to make it in, but I can't predict those last two. Those last two are the hard ones.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back and review for this year the names again one last time. Who do we think is getting in?
All right, so Merkel Chen, Gobbins will get in first round. Kenneth is likely to get in first round, but it might take a couple of rounds just for a few things to sort itself out. Villy will get in next. And Nominate will get in next after that. Pro-God will probably start pulling in with about 3 rounds to go. Brisk will probably pull in about 3 rounds to go. Mike Azaria is likely, if he gets in, to get in before Pro-God and Brisk. And then the last two are, we don't know. So Arceus, Atonia, Teddy, Dr. Spot, Beast, Jurius, Phantomite. There's a lot of names being thrown up. I'm not sure who's going to get it. It's the part of the voting style. It's kind of random.
You don't even name me. Oh, killing me.
It's just a predictive model, right? I mean, people can say, I'm going to buck the trend and do what they want.
Yeah, Rich, you're a little short. Unless you've got a big chunk of votes from somewhere I'm not seeing. Yeah.
Well, I've been promised the voting base from Warren Wormhole and the associated alt accounts and alt groups, and I've been assured certain votes from some groups I've flown with. But we shall see. This is terrifying.
You might stitch something together. But listen, last year we saw one guy, Huvenius, come out of nowhere. He got nearly 1,000 votes, and that was mostly based to a friend who said, I like your candidacy, I'm going to support you. One person can make a huge difference.
Yeah, which makes this a lot more fun than just being, I can predict what's going to happen.
Okay.
It's
sorry about
reality. But, well, I hope to see how it goes tomorrow. I actually can't wait, and all this speculation, it's at least gives me some room to relax and say, well, it's been quite a journey. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
All right. Let's see if another TIS candidate can get in there besides Kenneth. All right. So what we wanted to do, thank you very much for a great presentation, great number crunching. It's really interesting to walk through this with you, Ren. Very nicely done.
I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Next, I want to go to Shen. We're going to look at some prices, right? For let me just prepare that a little bit better. We were talking about Black Ops. What's the changes there? Like with these announced changes coming, what's the market look like?
I mean, essentially, they got buffed by last Friday's devlog. They got buffed a lot. So
yeah, look at that.
I mean, a general.
Go ahead.
Yeah, a general trend we've seen, like at least with those buffs, same thing we've seen last time during the Marauder buff, which is on the day of the devlog or within a few hours of the devlog. Quickly the stocks on the market are being bought up. right away. So the most extreme example here is the Marshall. I think there were only like 2 or 3 that are left on the market after one guy just bought all of the stock on that day.
Let's see if I can call up the Marshall.
How many Marshalls were bought all in one day?
We're gonna see that on the graph here. I believe there was like 40 something.
46.
46
46
Marshalls in one day. How much are Marshalls? 7
So-
billion each,
so that-
approximately.
So that would have made the Marshall jump a big range. So it went from I think 6.3 or 6.4 billion to about 9.2, 9.3 billion on that one day.
That's well over 300 billion worth of Marshalls.
Yeah, it's basically
Yeah,
6 and a half.
It is a big
It's like
investment.
That's a third. And if it goes up in price, that's a third of $1 trillion worth of Marshalls bought just like that.
Well, it did benefit from the changes that came out as well. It's a big time DPS ship, so it was a
Does
good
it benefit
purchase.
that much? Is it worth a third of $1 trillion to? I guess somebody's going to flip it and make a profit, but is that hull really worth that much? Are you going to get that much bang for your buck?
Again,
we will see after how the market's going to go.
Yeah, the Marshall's not a workhorse. It's more of a prized possession. Here it is. It's an exclusive ship that is hard to get. You had to win him by going to FanFest and Vegas in the same year. And then if you worked on Project Discovery really hard, you could earn enough to get one. So it's a rare ship.
I got mine from that. I got mine from Project Discovery.
Good for you.
That's refer a friend, but your friend needs to get, I believe, Omega in order to add one more number to your
I think 40
roster.
Friends or 40 accounts that's under a name, under your invite link to get Omega in order for you to get a BPC. And that takes about another $1 billion or so in material to actually build up the Marshall.
The Marshall is actually still available. It's dropping a little bit in price. It's no longer at 9.1. You can buy one for 8.8 billion ISK if you still wanted to grab one. Let's look at the Redeemer. It's selling for 1.5, and looks like the Black Ops market is cooling a bit after the initial buy up. I think we see that really clearly with the way it's dropping here. We'll look at Widow. A little less of a bump. And the Sin, this is the Galente Black Ops. Same as the Widow. And finally, the Panther. This looks a little bit more like the Redeemer.
Yeah, so a pattern that you can see here, well, at least a special thing to note is the Panther, the price of the Panther is about 1.6 bill. But the price of a Sing is about 1.2 to 1.3 billion. So I think this is my theory on it is the Sing was commonly used before the change or before the dev block came out. So there are more stocks on the market. So it's easier to bounce back for the Sing. So people can replace those stocks right away on the market. But the Panther was one of the least used Black Ops compared to the other 3. So there are fewer stocks compared to the Redeemer, the Widow, or the Sing. So people have to take time to actually make those Panther and put them on the market as well.
And that's why you think they're a little more expensive. They're just a little more rare.
Yeah, so after some time, everything will be smoothed out. Like price will be similar among everything, all of them.
Right. They are the most expensive Black Ops ship, aside from of course, the Marshall, which is 9 times the number. And you were saying that these come in for 1.7, basically, 1.7 billion, whereas the Sin comes in, as we can see, 1.3 billion. The Widow is 1.5, and so is the Redeemer, pretty much in that range.
That's curious because I would think the prices of these ships would be more influenced by their use in the past. To my knowledge, the Redeemer and the Sin were the primary Black Ops ships along with the Marshal. The Widow has generally been seen, well, prior to this change, rather weak, and the Panther was, in my opinion, even weaker, to the point where people even fitted artilleries on the Redeemer because they were stronger on the Redeemer than the Panther. So I would think that would have affected their prices because of their popularity and how strong they were compared to each other.
So market is about supply and demand. So what you said is about the demand side, but also you have to worry about supply side. So when those ships are more popular, that means they have more stock readily available to them at any given time. So when this kind of big earthquake type of buff happens, it's easier for those things and those redeemers and the widows to bounce back compared to the panther because there are fewer stocks.
I wonder if there's not some psychology to that too. When you see less of something on the market, you start to think rarity. So you buy on speculation more so than if you were to see something that was fully stocked.
Well, if that were the case, Maverall, I would think some really obscure, rare items and storyline objects, or God forbid, Shaquille's speed enhancer, would be more commonly purchased and hoarded and traded, but, well, nobody purchases or nobody really trades the Shaquille's speed enhancer. No, a lot of people don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
Another comparison we can see with the price is if you compare the general price for a Black Ops to a Marauder, which both of them are the only two T2 battleships that are available.
Advanced battleships.
Yeah. So the Black Ops is about like 1.5 billion, but generally speaking, Marauder is about 1.8 up. So there's a big gap difference between the Black Ops and the Marauders.
Right. These are coming in at 1.7, 1.9. Oops.
Well, surely it's all the popularity, right? Because with the Widow itself, while it is a powerful battleship, it is a battleship. It does have T2 resist and a lot of bonuses. It is actually not that great at combat. The Black Ops battleships are not that great at combat for their price compared to the Marauders, which are absolutely devastating right now and really powerful for what they do. Incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it's about different roles within a fleet, right? If you want DPS, go for...
The Black Ops ships are made for hidden runs. They're made for assassinations. They're meant to go all in, while the Marauders are actually far more combat capable and have more generalized use. So I think that also affects the popularity. People don't really... The amount of uses you can have for a Black Ops ship is fewer than the Marauders.
Yeah, but in some way, Marauders only most likely is about a one-time investment. If you do it the way that is intended, which is high sec level formations. But right now we are seeing a lot of Marauders in PvP, ESS, all kinds of stuff like that.
Well, you can't really use a Black Ops inside of an ESS, and if you use it in a PvP scenario, it's awkward. It isn't that strong in PvP. It's at least not in a skirmish. I think
so that's the thing with Black Ops is you can only do one thing. But for Marauder, you can do a few things.
What about the training? Do you think the training affects the costs? Because, to my knowledge, the Black Ops ships require you to train a bunch of Sino skills and jump skills. Now, if you...
Sorry, go ahead, finish your point.
If you're training into, say, a Dreadnought, you'll have those skills, but if you didn't have plans to train into a Dreadnought in the first place, you probably don't have a bunch of jump drive skills.
So Capital's a whole different train. If you're going to go into anything Capitals, even if it's just a jump freighter where you don't want to get into combat, you're in for a giant chunk of training that you wouldn't do for any other reason.
So, not really.
This training huge. Wouldn't that affect the popularity too?
So this is the thing with capital training stuff. So a Marauder training skill point is more like a Dread. So a Dreadout doesn't require any jump drive skills at all. It doesn't require... But a carrier, no matter it's a fax, a super carrier, or just a standard carrier, requires jump drive operation 5 and jump fuel conservation 3 or 4. So it requires a very high amount of jump drive skills, which corresponds to the Black Ops ships.
But it seems to me
So if you're
those are requirements, but you're not going to use a dreadnought if you can't jump with it. I mean, you defeat the purpose of it, don't you?
Well, no, but like if you want to get on the ship, let's say if I just want to get on a dread and I have JDC 4, that's usually, well, for us that's standard, because JDC 4 on a capital is the same as JDC 5 on a super capital. So you're able to go with a fleet. Whether how much fuel you're gonna use, that's up to you, right? If you want to take the time in to train them, you can save more cost. But generally speaking, it's not really required.
I think a lot of the profit margin, the difference in price, comes from the industry cost to make them. Just chucking these into RavWorks, the Redeemer costs less, but the margin is better. So the actual cost to make it is lower than the Paladin.
Yeah, that's part of the thing. It's the industry side.
Well, with these new changes, I can see why people suddenly want to buy them and start using them. And it's speculation. People, if the price increase, well, if they're buffed, people want to use them. People speculate the price will increase, and they want to meddle it.
I don't think it's strictly production cost, although it maps really well, right? I mean, that looks just like the price difference right there. But I think you have, right now you have speculation buying, you have surplus, you have a little hype. That all needs to settle out. But I think when the production cost does kick in, you will see pretty much what we're seeing now, but although I think it is kind of a coincidence.
At least we've seen the Black Ops market cool down way faster than the Marauder ones.
Exactly.
Like one big reason behind the Marauder ones, they got buffed. And so the price went up and then start going down, and then industrial change, the big one. And then that just went up again, and then right now it's somewhat cooling down. So,
well, but both these ships are T2, so their production costs, I'm pretty sure, didn't change.
Well, like if their base ship changed from like 200 mil before,
but they use the same
300.
Don't they use the same base ship? No, they don't, do they? The Paladin.
Yes,
and
they do.
They do use the
no, they don't.
No, Redeemer's Armageddon, or the Geddon.
Armageddon.
And the Paladin is the Abaddon. So they use different.
A couple. Abaddon has no T2.
Yeah.
No T2.
Anyway, their base ship, their T1 model, I think do have different build costs, and that might account for some of the change. But the T2 variant of battleships did not get changed. Just the one ingredient, the ship. The T1 version is what got changed. And maybe that accounts for some of the variety. Do you think Black Ops got it buffed? Do you feel like they got... obviously, the Marauder got a lot of love, right? Huge amount of love from CCP. It's a great ship for purposes that people even are attracted to. The Black Ops seem to get almost fixed. Not really a ton of love, just a little more functional.
Yeah, because there are a smaller group of people who use Black Ops compared to Marauders. Because Marauder, you can use it on any PvE things, right? Escalations in nullsec, level 4 missions in highsec, level 5 missions in lowsec, and you can use it for PvP as well. So it's very versatile. But compared to a Black Ops, where it's basically Black Ops, that's what it does. Dropping people and basically being a small Titan bridge. That only bridge Black Ops.
Well, certain ships, yeah.
So their ability is limited in a lot of ways.
Right. But I think what you were asking about, Rich, is there a skill difference? I don't think you go into these ships. I don't think you meander into these ships. But if you were, I think the Marauder is something you would meander into easier. Maybe not. It has a really tough train. I think it's like, it has this, I forgot what it is. It's this one skill that's not really used in anything else.
Tactical weapons configuration.
That's one. There's a second one in there. I forget what it is. It's a CPU skill, and you have to take it to 5.
Weapon upgrade 5.
Well, advanced weapon upgrades 5. Of course I have advanced weapon
No.
upgrades 5.
Everybody will have that. But there's actually another one, I believe. We should look up.
I mean, the hardest skill for any of this T2 battleship is just the ratio battleship 5. That's the hardest one you need to train, because that one only gives you that the T2 battleship skills. Because for everything else, it's actually used somewhere else. But for battleship skill, that one skill is just only used here.
Let me see. Perhaps the training changed. I thought there was something to do with the CPU. CPU management, it only requires 4. And that's nothing.
So to get into a Marauder, you need energy grid upgrades 5 and
That's
advanced weapons upgrades 5 to get Marauder 1.
I think maybe it was the advanced weapons upgrade, which is a tough train, but anybody serious about fitting will get that. It's very hard to train it up. It takes a long time, over a month. But it opens up Marauders to you, and I think by that time you're already into advanced stuff. So that path is going to be much more natural than a Black Ops path. I think Black Ops is you're veering off your normal path for some specialization because it has jump bridging capabilities and stuff.
Yeah, like I can definitely see that, because that bridging skill only used in Black Ops or Titan. There's only 2 places that you use it. And the skills more like you start with a cover ops as a frigate, move on to Force Recon, and then to Black Ops. That's basically growth path for a Black Ops pilot.
So for me, to train into a Black Ops ship, it will take me right now on my Richmond account 86 days and 16 hours, compared to a Marauder 32 days. Oh, this is, well, let me check the skills to get into a Black Ops ship, but I'm fairly sure that all of these skills are requirements. They're all jump drive skills, and if you're a subcap pilot, you don't. If you're flying majority in small gang PvP where you don't field capitals that often, if not at all, on your main account, you will not have jump drive skills. If I'd have no reason to be in a jump freighter as of right now, I have no capitals as of right now, so I have no reason to train these. And for people who, we have to keep in mind that these skills, capitals, are not going to be used by a huge number of players in high security, and there are a significant amount of players in high security who will use Marauders. So I think that's also why the demand for Marauders will always be so much more than the demand for Black Ops.
I see, yeah. Well, if that's what you meant by do skills make a difference, I think they're definitely a different skill path to do Black Ops. Career path, really. And you're right. That's stuff that's used in low sec, null sec, not really in high sec.
And yes, of course I have Advanced Weapon Upgrades 5. It's very important. At high skill PvP levels, you have to squeeze out every inch.
I think it's considered one of the Magic 14 or whatever they call that. And it's such a hard train. I don't think
it's such a stupid train. It's an entire month and a little bit more worth of subscription, and you're just sitting there waiting.
It's a real gatekeeper.
And you have to do this. If you have to do this, otherwise you're playing the game hobbled.
Yeah,
I paid an entire month just so I can play the game like every other person. I don't play it hobbled. I had to pay for it.
It's not ideal. That's a high sec or low sec player. Like for us, any capital skills that's 2-4, 2-5, that's at least a month to start with. We're not complaining anything about that. Come on, like a fighter 5, 48 days with plus 15 points. Like it's ridiculous a lot of times.
Let me
start training capital skills and looking into capital skills, and then you're not going to complain about sub capital skills.
So if you look at the pricing margins for the T1 version, there's only 50 million difference between the Apocalypse and the Armageddon, where the price in the T2 version is 250 million difference. So there's a 200 million variance there, and the margin is opposite as well. So the Paladin obviously takes more in industry to make than the Redeemer does.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want a better analysis, you're going to have to find Kenneth, I think.
Yeah. Well, also, I think McLeod made this point in the audience there that there's a strong draw on T2 materials as well right now. So even though the price even though the ingredient set for T2 didn't change, besides the T1 ship that gets put into that, the pull on the resources that make T2 it has increased. More things are pulling on it now. So those prices will go up. Therefore, the overall price of T2 will go up as well. I'm looking at the, what is this here? Advanced weapon upgrades. I just wanted to look at this, this level 5 skill here that's it's required for Marauders, Doomsday Operation, and Tactical Weapon Configuration. Tactical Weapon Configuration is Dreadnought.
Auxiliaries?
It's a Dreadnought skill, yeah.
Bastion and Siege. Bastion and
Right.
Siege.
Yeah, these are advanced models for capitals, these two here, but Marauders is the only subcap ship that this is required for. And that's why it's such a big train. And although it's considered one of the, what do they call that? Magic, whatever it is.
Magic 14.
Yeah,
yes.
it really shouldn't be there because I think you're,
So
it's a fitting skill, but it's very advanced.
The one that really annoys you, because I just trained into a Marauder, is the energy grid upgrades, because it doesn't really help anything else.
Exactly,
But you
that's
need it
the
to
one.
get Marauder 1.
That's the one that I was talking about. That is just kind of this incidental one. But it's the only thing that's off your path. What I meant by all this was, if you're a PvPer and you're going in to get your skill set as, you know, to a point that's really competitive, Marauders are basically on your way, except that one skill. Whereas Black Ops is like, you have to take a right turn and you have to drive for a while before you get to Black Ops, because you have to do all this jump skill stuff that's really reserved for capitals. But anyway, that's a quick look at the market for some fun. We'll give you a proper show on that. Tomorrow, do not forget, got to watch CCP TV and find out who CSM16 is, what that council will look like, and who the winners are.
Are we sure? Are we confirming that they are actually doing that tomorrow? Because apparently they're meant to do the live draw on the 21st of June, according to previous releases. I'm confused now.
Well, now I got to check, but I heard it was Friday. Can somebody check CCP Swift's Twitter? I'll have a look. And I will actually write. I thought that I had asked. And if anybody knows when it is, it does say it. I looked it up. It does say it on the 21st.
Then who the hell said
I mean,
it
we're
was on
talking about
Friday?
skills. Yeah, we're talking about skills. Like the most common skills for either high-sec or null-sec player is probably Log G5. Yeah.
Yes, that was a hard train too. That's actually, I think if you're on your career path to do PvP combat in a fleet, in large fleets, that's your first stop. Because the neat thing about being a logistics pilot is most logistics pilots work with either shield or armor. And so all you need to do is train into armor, for instance, and now you can belong to 5 or 6 different doctrines of ships, and you can be in those fleets because they're all armor and that's all you're repairing. Whereas if you train into a DPS ship, you got to train into the ship, you got to train into those guns, you got to train into make those guns effective, and you got to train your tank at the same time and all that kind of stuff. So you become a lot more specialized. And then if your crew decides to run with a different ship than you're ready for, you have to sit out that fleet. So going into nullsec, logistics first gets you more involved quicker. Also, it used to be we used to have to deploy a lot when we were fighting in campaigns. And so if some people would just bring 3 or 4 different logistics ships and they would be ready to play in any fleet, as opposed to trying to figure out what ships are going to be used in that theater. So it's a lot easier too to pack up and go.
And also, like Log G5 is the only skill that at level 5 it unlocks something. Like for any other skill, I don't think it unlocks anything. But for Log G5, it's required for facts for the triage mode or triage mod, basically. So yeah, that's something for facts pilot or capital pilots.
Tell me, what is going on with the markets that is so curious? I understand that we went over it briefly about how the price of injectors are connected to the price of Plex, but it's slightly delayed. We understand that now there's probably a lot of people subscribing especially with the Capsuleer Day celebrations. But what else stirs with the market?
Well, yesterday, you speak of what we talked about yesterday, where if we look at Plex, we can see that it's doing a little bit of a recovery. We'll look at the graph just to make it more dramatic, and we'll back out to see more of the field. And as you can see, it's been on a long slide down. It finally got to really about 2.2, 2.3, and now it seems like it's getting a little healthier. It's got some bumps in there. Those probably have to do with sales more than anything else. And on the other hand, what you have with large injectors is a continual slide with just a little uptick here at the very end, but you don't know if that's going to continue or not. And these two things should be pegged together, but they're not directly pegged together. The skill extractor is pegged exactly to, as you can see, this looks just like Plex. There's Plex. Here's extractor. Because there's no X factor here. But when you get to injector, which is an extractor plus 500,000 skill points, there's an X factor. That is how much your skill points worth. And that's where you see the bargaining happen, where skill points are sometimes worth a lot and sometimes they're worth less. It just depends on how many people are buying up those shortcuts. So this has a lagging, this is a lagging indicator. In other words, you'll see Plex perform first, and then you will see that hit the injector market. That's what you were talking about. We talked about it yesterday, but I don't know what else is going on in the market. I haven't had a chance to look. Anybody else look? All right, then. We'll, again,
Yeah.
we'll have a look at it.
Yeah.
And we wanted to check on some of the changes that were happening. That's where you're going to see some major market activity, which we saw with Black Ops. Okay, I think we should wrap it up. I want to say thanks to Rich and to Shen for hanging out. And special thanks to Ren, who's with us talking in stations. He's the one who did the presentation that you just saw on the predictive modeling of CSM results. I heard Friday were the announcements, but we did see that it was the 21st where they may announce. So we'll try to get an answer for you. And don't forget to watch our interview with the Triglavian guys, as they are determined to blow up their own structures in Pochven as a protest to the conditions inside of Pochven. That's a complaint to CCP. I wanted to say thank you to everybody that showed up today, all the fans, and we will see you next time on Talking in Stations.